Hi, it's Deborah. Welcome to Voices of Swell. This is a series that really focuses on storytelling and how the human voice really touches the narrative. And I wanted to focus this conversation today on personal narrative and how it impacts the structure of a story. And speaking with Bill Pruitt about this to me is really interesting because as a producer, he has traversed so many topics, from producing The Deadliest Catch, where he's looking at the lives of people who are in peril all the time, and how does he pull out not just the story in that moment, but how that person's background, who that person is, how does that impact the trajectory of that episode. If those of you who don't know Bill Pruitt, he's an Emmy Award-winning producer. He's a soulful, beautiful person. And we speak to him today here on Voices of Swell to really drop into his aesthetic as a storyteller. I'm going to put some of his credits down here in the description just so I know I do respect for what he's accomplished. And I'm just so excited for us to talk here on Voices of Swell about the art of storytelling, specific to what he's experienced with the individuals that he's covered, and how to tell their story, and how to weave their personal story into the idea of the narrative of the whole show. So, Bill, thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you what an honor it is to kind of get messy with you and explore with you and sort of figure out how storytelling is changing during this time specifically. So I guess my first question to you is a personal one in terms of sort of the tabula rasa we all think we have when we're about to start a project. When you are about to start a project and you really want to give it space to teach you about what it's supposed to be, where do you put yourself in that? Because you're the producer, you're creating it. But how do you show up in terms of saying, okay, this is me, I have an idea for this, but I want to get out of the way? What's your mechanism to get out of the way so you can really birth something authentically? I look forward to hearing you riff on this. Thanks.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for your question. I'm so sorry for the delay. This is my first ever in the history of Bill Pruitt and my world a swell. So this is unnerving and exciting and all at once. But anyway, to answer your question in 5 minutes or less, how do I start? Where do I put myself in these stories? So when I was going through a long, protracted divorce, it seemed that all of the series I signed up for had deadly or deadliest in the title. And I don't think that was by choice, certainly by instinct, but it was an opportunity that afforded me a chance to examine life on the edge where you could conceivably lose your life. And I think that I sort of needed that, not that I was by any means suicidal, but going through stuff that, made life appear differently. So why not consider it in terms of, what could take a life? So deadliest roads, deadly cults, deadliest catch, all these things have come along and danger lurked, but more importantly, life and the promise and renewal of life for those that survived. That was one example. Here in the pandemic, I've been getting strangely offers, finally, to consider working on shows that travel, which is ironic and odd because we're all stuck at home, right? But I think that, again, with most of us, the impetus is I want to get out of here. I want to escape quarantine. I want to be safe, but I want to see people. I want to see things, and I want to do things. So whether it's, martial arts around the world, food around the nation, curiosities around the world as well with Jeff Goldblum. All kinds of opportunities have come along to travel and get out, and that's something that I would very much like to do. But specifically, bringing my point of view to a story is just basically the altar at which I and most storytellers pray, and that's at the altar of intention and obstacle. What do they want and what's in their way? Those are the stories that fascinate me the most. And again, thank you for your kind words and thoughts about me and my career. I am interested in continuing the conversation. more rigorously. Thanks.
Wow, that is so fascinating, the connection of Deadly to a time in your life when things were feeling like they were falling off the vine and dying. And now the resurgence of opportunity that brings you the chance to see the world again. I love the expression of the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And I want to ask you, we're living in a time right now when what we look at on the screen is our world. It's our window. It's how we are connecting because we're so stuck. Does this change the way you are going to move towards your next story? Let's say you're doing a travel story. Knowing that so many of us cannot travel, how do you, as an agent for us, as a creator and a visionary, to paint the world through this medium so that we can drop into that canvas that you create for us, knowing that we can't get out ourselves, how is that going to change the way you approach your projects?
Hi again, Deborah. Thanks again for your questions. They're so great. I agree. The way we do one thing is the way we do everything. And for me, whether it's an adventure series or a travel food documentary, I tend to look at it and go about it in the guise of a romantic. And not in a Harlequin romance way of romantic, but in war can be romantic if the right side wins. I really believe that in the pandemic, when we're closed off from our loved ones and from the jet ride to Fiji or wherever it is we want to go, the best that content creators like myself can offer up is a romantic version of that very thing you're starved for, so that you can have, at least in the moment, there on your couch in your living room or on your phone somewhere, a romanticized version of that will sustain you for the moment that you're home and locked away. And also maybe inform you about certain aspects of it. I'll give you an example. I think what's going on in Beirut, Lebanon right now with the aftermath of the disastrous explosion there and the micro-doc profiles of the first responders there, they're so hopeful, they're so beautiful, and they remind us that even there in the midst of that and in the aftermath, there's beauty and hopefulness and love and companionship, and these stories move me as I think they would anybody. So it's in the veil of romanticism that I look at the world and try to offer up a meal of sorts, just as a chef would. You know, you're hungry for pasta, let me give you that. If it's a salad you're craving, let me offer you that. That's typically how I go about it. I hope that answers your question. And thanks again.
I love how romantic that answer was. You know, it reminds me of the times we're in right now, this perception of confinement versus the freedom of our minds. And I know that, Nelson Mandela was one of many who talked about the prisons around us have nothing to do with the limitations of our minds, and how that's just almost impossible when you are able to conjure what you need to inside your head. There's limitless possibilities, and it sounds so cliche, but it's so real. And the idea of you sort of procuring a world for us as a director, producer, where you assign like this romance to traveling, and you invite us to come in and to do that with you. And it is an invitation, and it's a conscious invitation, because, you have sort of the Rick Steves of the world who are, back in the day when he was doing travel shows, they were so very informative, but you really felt the kind of like stiffness. And there's so much more sensuality now. There's so much more permission to feel into experiences. And I feel like that's the power of, you feel the imprimatur of a director and a producer inside programming when you feel their intention to invite us and to bring us into this world. And I want to sort of talk about the idea of surrender right now. We're all being asked to be so controlling, to be mindful of others, and to really care for others by wearing our masks, and to be socially distanced, distant, and that creates a culture of awareness where you can't be in abandon, you can't be in surrender. So of course we're dropping into our screens and we're trying to disappear into worlds where there was freedom. Or there is freedom. Sometimes we go to old movies and we go, oh my God, they're not wearing a mask. They're in big crowds. How can that be possible? And I just did that last night, actually. I couldn't sleep and I watched Barbra Streisand's concert. She's such an icon. And as corny as she is, that corn is, I was hungry for it. But I diverge back into that world. But let's go back into this world of surrender and abandonment. How do you feel as someone who's in that world of you guys are deciding what's going to go on screen? Sometimes art imitates life, sometimes life imitates art. Is it important more now than ever that we surrender inside these worlds because we can't surrender in our real world? And what role are you playing in that invitation to surrender?
I think the idea of surrender is an important one. And just as you said, we surrender to the obligations we have to wear masks and to stay put. And so when it comes to watching Barbra Streisand, something I highly, highly advocate in this time, because as corny as it might be, I saw her at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn on her recent last tour, and she owned me. She owned that whole stadium. The auditorium was filled with adoring fans, and every single one of us left touched. So along the lines of the surrender and my role and what it means for you to surrender, I look at it this way. When I was directing theater many years ago, we used to think that, the one guy who came to see our play, and sometimes that's all you would get, even though we were in New York City, came 15 miles away on foot with his last $10 to watch us perform and to see my directing work. So we took it very, very seriously. And similarly, when you devote 45 minutes of your evening to something that I've produced, I take that very seriously. I know the surrender that you've made to my programming, and hopefully we've got you hooked for all 10 episodes, or you're binging for the next 4 hours if that's the case. But this idea of us surrendering to our phones, our screens, is a big one, because it can be so resplendent, and it can be tragic and all too disappointing. But I do take the idea of it seriously. So I'm going to change up the topic a little bit. I'm going to throw out to you surprise. When have you been surprised by an entertainment? When have you been surprised by something you thought was going to happen and didn't, or that happened you weren't expecting? Like this. I'm going to play my accordion for you. Now, that's assuming you're still listening.
Hey, this is Deborah using my Deborah account, not the Voices of Swell account. We've just opened up this panel so that everybody can take part and connect with each other. And Bill, your last question. Oh my God, such a perfect segue to open this up to human beings, as opposed to flowers, I guess. I have to tell you, one of the most delightful surprises that happened to me was a couple of years ago. I saw Sugar Man, Searching for Sugar Man, and it was the very first week it came out. Like, I knew nothing about this guy, and now everyone knows him and he's doing concerts. But I didn't know he was still alive. And I was one of the very few people in the audience, because it was lots of South African people at that point, because they knew who Sugar Man was. But I was this very innocent person about to see this documentary of this dead guy. And the fact that he wasn't dead, and I found out in this documentary about this man that's very much alive, which is the whole purpose of the documentary. So I'm not doing a spoiler because it's many, many years later and he's been all over the globe performing. It was one of the most beautiful, giggly, transportive moments of my life in a dark room with a lot of people. I'll never forget it. I felt so happy that I didn't know he was alive, so that it revealed itself, and we got to see this man. It's a great question, and I hope some people join. And I just want to thank you, by the way, for taking time to meander with me. And this swell never ends. It continues in perpetuity. It slows down, it speeds up, it goes around rocks, it goes through streams, it even goes uphill, it goes downhill. It's swell. And that accordion, okay, just saying, wow. And we got to connect offline and do some music because that's just made me so happy. Thanks. Here we go. Let's have some flow here.
So this is a great conversation, first of all, but Bill, I have to say, as I was listening to you talk, I checked out your IMDb page, and I was kind of blown away because you have been directly a part of so many shows that I've watched in my life, some that are, amongst my favorite ever. But I have a question for you about your work on The Amazing Race. I've always been kind of blown away at how a show like that is filmed. I got to imagine that there's tons of different camera teams, at various locations throughout the entire shoot. It seems like a logistical nightmare. As somebody who's worked in production on, stage shows, I've been overwhelmed by the amount of work that I've had to do there. I can't even imagine what it would be like in a foreign country on the run, or on the go, more like it. On the run sounds like they're criminals. But I'm just sort of fascinated if you could provide some insight into, how that show operated production-wise when there's so many things that need to go right, just plane tickets for everybody, making sure that no gear is missing. I mean, my head hurts just thinking about it. But thank you for being here. Got cut off there at the end, but yes, thank you for being here, and I appreciate your time and insight.
Man, thank you so much for that comment about my work, and particularly on The Amazing Race. It remains a series that I'm incredibly proud of having been associated with. But just know that there are, at any given time, 1,500 people employed on this CBS game show. It's an FCC-regulated game show, and part of the hardest part of producing the series is keeping it fair, so that when there's $1 million at stake, everyone has an equal chance of getting to it and winning it. But it is a race around the world, and so there's logistical teams. There's the competition strategists who put together the course, the race course, if you will, and then people like myself who just are along to tell the story. But when it comes down to filming it, it's on the backs of the camera and sound team that travels with the contestants. So there's teams of 2 people, right? And following them in every step of the journey, and we mix it up over the course of the race, so it's not, favoritism or a faster camera team or what have you. But there's a camera operator and a sound person, and the sound person in their backpack carries all the batteries and cards that the camera operator would use. And while things have gotten lighter along the way over the years, the rigors of telling the story and making sure that they're ahead of the teams, getting the shots, knowing where they're going to be and what they're going to shoot is key. And then, of course, keeping all that information to themselves so that they can just simply follow what the contestants are doing in a world that they're discovering as they're discovering it, if that makes sense. Happy to talk about this some more. Any other questions you have about that show or any other, please ask. I'm an open book, and I'm, again, really thankful for your appreciation. Makes me feel like I'm waiting for Sugar Man, making that instead. Okay, bye.